So as the Sefer at Home orders in March began, literally when Rabbi Guzik and I saw the announcement on TV, just several hours later, we were about to move into a new home. Thankfully, movers were considered essential, so we were able to do so. But in the process of that moving, if you've ever moved before, and it was the first time we had moved in 11 years, we went through our old belongings and boxes to see what could be discarded, what we had to keep. And one thing that both of us came to find that we knew we had to keep were the senior yearbooks of our high schools. Now, we didn't grow up in the same city, not the same high school, and neither of us went to a Jewish high school. When we opened up the pages of that yearbook, both of our yearbooks, a coast apart, in the margins, our classmates wrote, "Can't wait to see you when you become rabbis." Somehow, those classmates who knew very little about Judaism saw the potential that each one of us had and what our future path would be, even if we did not see it in that exact moment. And many of you have probably had that experience returning to a high school yearbook with fear. Because the fear is not only to find out what your friends had become, but the fear is about our own bodies and our own souls to see sometimes what we have not become. Did the expectation of our senior blurbs pan out? Yes, maybe with the title, but I can tell you I'm not the same rabbi that maybe those kids thought decades ago. There's been disappointments and there's been joys, there's been sorrows and there's been simcha. There's been marriage, there's been children, there's been loss, there's been joy and everything in between. But when I had this experience of the yearbook, at the same exact time I picked up a book. It's called And Then We Grew Up. And that book was authored by Rachel Friedman, who just so happens to be 1 year ahead of me in the high school I went to. As you know, I have a passion for music, and Rachel was a virtuosic violist. We knew her potential. We knew which way she was going, and she did that. She went to a music conservatory in Boston right after high school. But after freshman year, the potential didn't pan out. She dropped music fully. She became an author. She got married. She moved on from that potential part of her life. But then her career fell apart as an author. Her marriage fell apart. And one day she went to see her accountant to find out what her tax bill would be. And she found out that her tax bill was going to be more than the money that was in her bank account. And so to drown in her sorrows on her way home, living in New York City, she went to a movie. And as she sat in the movie theater on that screen, she recognized the actor because they both had been campers at the Interlaken camp for artists as children. Interlaken is a place where musicians and actors and visual artists, where they gather together as youth to hone their potential. And here she was, down in her life, but watching her classmate from Interlaken on the big screen. And so that forced her to go back to the yearbook of Interlaken. And she began to look up from kids around the country what they were doing now. And she found them. She tracked them down, some of them here in California, some in Minnesota, all around the country, and she asked them one simple question. She said, "Have you fulfilled your potential? Do you think you have fulfilled your potential?" And this is what Rachel writes. She writes, "Potential can be good and bad. Yes, studying hard increases the potential for your success, but wet roads increase the potential for accidents. And in our culture, just the simple word potential has been infused with promise." What Rachel began to understand fairly quickly was just what we're learning now. The word potential has so much more than what we thought of it as children. Because today we're going to change the word potential and rather change it to self-actualization. As the psychologist Abraham Maslow teaches, self-actualization is to become more and more what one is. Not what you should become, not what others tell you should have been or should be, but to become more and more of what one is. When Rachel goes on her search for her classmates of Interlochen, she realizes, yes, they might not have fulfilled the potential, but they are well beyond in self-actualization. Some of those musicians became teachers, others became parents, and in fact, so much like all of us, everybody was still searching decades later. Rachel concludes her book, "Gratitude and longing can coexist." She writes, "My life is wonderful and perfect. My life is wonderful and imperfect. I can be a little lost and also on the right path." Sort of feels like all of us as we are in Yom Kippur on our way to Elah this evening. I know there's lots to be grateful for, but boy, do we long for so much right now. Imperfect. Imperfect. What a great way to describe 5,780, an imperfect year. We have seen our potential cut at our knees. Potential of employment, potential of relationships, all severely limited. But the self-actualization that we have seen is limitless because it's in our soul. Because we have become who we need to be. Because we have had no other choice. On Yom Kippur, our rabbis teach us that we are judged not only on our actions, but rather we fulfilled the purpose of our soul in this world. Yes, mitzvot are important, do not get me wrong. But if we fulfill every mitzvah in the Torah and don't fill the role of our soul in this world, then we have not done anything else. And that's what we're going to read this afternoon in the book of Jonah. Jonah is the self-actualization story of the Jewish people. Right in front of his eyes, he wishes to hide and therefore swallowed up by a whale and spit back on the shore in Nineveh. When that occurs, he realizes that he must self-actualize. He must become the person who he needs to be. You know, when I read these words from Rachel's book and saw the events of this past week, with the passing of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, it reminded me that the world that she was born into was not one that could see the potential that she had. You might see on our website, and we sent it through the family Minyan email, the memorial service that was held in the Supreme Court, the first Jew to lie in state. The memorial was conducted by my colleague, Rabbi Lauren Holtzblatt of Congregation Addis Israel in Washington, D.C. And in that eulogy, Holtzblatt quotes Ginsburg, and she says, "Think back to 1787. In our Constitution, who were we the people? They certainly weren't women. They certainly were not people held in human bondage. But the genius of our Constitution is that now, over more than 200 sometimes turbulent years later, the we has expanded and expanded." I never saw Ruth Bader Ginsburg yearbook from high school. But if I was a betting man, I could bet it didn't say rabbi and it didn't say Supreme Court Justice of the potential that she would fulfill. She was born into a world that did not accept the potential that she achieved, and yet she left this world actualizing the potential that she desired. And so that's our mission this afternoon of Yom Kippur. You're home, so this job is easy. Go find your yearbook. High school, college, elementary school, just something that described what others thought you would be. Yes, they wrote Rabbi in the margins of Rabbi Guzik's yearbook and mine, but that experience has been very different than they thought and very different than what I thought as well. Because there have been challenges, but most importantly, there have been blessings. There have been actual experiences that shaped the title before our names. And so when you look at that yearbook today, think about what the rest of the world told you you would be. And today become the person who we need. Ma'aseh ish ufekudato. You can ask yourself how many commandments you have fulfilled, but also ask yourself this: have I fulfilled the mission and purpose in my world? If I was to make one prediction, I would say this year will have its challenges, locally, nationally, and even globally. And yes, as Rachel Friedman told us, we will get lost along the way. But when that happens, let's remind ourselves that today, when we begin to self-actualize, we will be able to gather here again next year, God willing, shoulder to shoulder, in a more gentler, more kinder, more grateful, and more peaceful world. Gmar Chatima Tova. May we be inscribed in the self-actualized book of life in the year to come. And let us say, Amen. Before we continue with our repetition of our Amidah, and we're going to hear from Zach Zimmerman in just a moment, in one moment. Usually we have a High Holy Day appeal and we have a speech and somebody to give that. But I want to be blunt and direct because we also are limited in the amount of time. And so this year we had to think uniquely about how we do this, because usually you would have pledge cards in your seat. I cannot tell you the amount of gratitude that we as a Sinai Temple clergy and a Sinai Temple family feel for the dedication of its membership. What you do together with us makes such a difference in this world. I'm not sure if you saw, but over these services, not just Sinai Temple has watched, but Yom Kippur is open to the world, and thousands upon thousands, I believe over this last night, over 20,000 people tuned in to the message that Sinai Temple has to give. And therefore we ask. We, of course, ask for your dedication to this great place, these sacred walls that, as I described last week, feel so lonely, but only because of you feel so full again. And so I'm going to explain how it's going to work. You do not have to place a payment right now, but we do have a system that you are able to pledge to donate. If you see on your screen, you can send a text to the number 91999, and you can text Sinai 20 in the body of the text. That will allow you to have a reminder after Ne'ilah tonight to make your pledge to the Sinai Temple community on behalf of Family Minyan. If it's easier for you to email our communications office and they'll get back to you for your pledge, you can see at the bottom of the page, stcommunications@sinaitemple.org. Again, this is a moment of sha'at dechak. It means a time of need, a time that is unlike any other time. And so we ask you again, if you have a phone nearby, you can simply text 91999 and text Sinai 20. You'll get a response where you'll see on the left-hand side of the slide, click here to complete, and that will allow you to make this synagogue, the synagogue that not I, but you created, that we create together. As we've seen over this day, so many of the rabbis of the past from Family Minyan, we've done it together, and I know we're going to be stronger and stronger in the future as well. We thank you for your generosity, and we thank you for your resources, and simply we thank you for being you.